This is episode 9 of Quest Rewind. Welcome everybody to this classic throwback adventure where for the past couple of weeks we've talked a lot about the Xbox 360, from its problems with the Red Ring of Death to the initial reveal at the E3 2005 Microsoft press conference with the silver bag, because the future was then, the future is still now, because this console, whether you were a PS3 gamer or 360 or something, we can't forget about the fact that the Xbox 360 was very important in the grand scheme of video game history. So today, we'll be talking about some of the top or best games from that console. When you think about the Xbox 360, we all have those images, right? We associate some games for the PS1 with like a Crash Bandicoot or Spyro. What's that with the Xbox 360? We will be doing that with yours truly, Juan from Puerto Rico.
I'm Ryan from Boston.
And I'm Keith from London, Ontario, Canada.
And we had talked about the fact that we didn't really get this console at launch. And I can't really say I think I played the Xbox 360 more now, like after the fact, after the Xbox One came out. But I was an avid gamer for a couple of years. But for you guys, even if you didn't play them, when you thought about the console and it was all about, oh, kind of like Super Mario 64, that's what you get, the N64 console. What was that for the Xbox 360 in your guys' opinion?
When I think of the Xbox 360 and I have to think of one game, I don't think there is any game that just fit that Xbox 360 kind of label at the top more than Modern Warfare 2. I just feel like that is the if you were to think of just like a case for an Xbox 360 game, for some reason for me, I just think of Modern Warfare 2. And now obviously we had Call of Duty, starting with Call of Duty 2 on the 360. I think we saw that in the E3 episode. But really, Modern Warfare 2, I think, was for a lot of people Modern Warfare was a big deal for multiplayer, but I think Modern Warfare 2 is like the pivotal bro gamer game that defined the system.
See, I agree, but I almost didn't want to say it because really the first thing I think about, because Modern Warfare 2 is also the game that comes to mind for me, but it's specifically no Russian. That makes me think of like, that is the pivotal thing that I think of when it comes to the Xbox 360 gaming. Like, multiplayer is its own amazing thing. I loved multiplayer Modern Warfare 2, and I played a ton of it on the 360, but when we talk about like the big stamp that the Xbox 360 left on the industry, it was that first time that maybe they went a little too far with Call of Duty stuff and that no Russian mission specifically. And it's the first image that comes to mind when you say, like, name your top 360 game. I go right to no Russian. I don't know what that says about me, but
is that the last time people talked about the campaign mode for a Call of Duty game? Maybe I'm wrong there.
I think if anything, it really said how, for so many people, they say, oh, you play Call of Duty for the multiplayer, but at least in my case, like, I was all about the single player, and I love to play the multiplayer. Like, I think that's a very iconic game, but it was that thing that it wasn't a 20-hour campaign. Usually it was 5 to 8 hours. It didn't overstay its welcome. It was always fluid. Like, we talked about this a few episodes ago. Even the worst Call of Duty game, from a mechanical standpoint, is great, right? Or is at least good. But here we have it. It's like Modern Warfare 2, man. I don't think you can do a whole lot better. And one game I did have to bring up because, and this is where Keith and I really come up, this is where we bonded a lot, is Gears of War, particularly the second one. Because I had mentioned
Gears 2.
Yeah. The first game, I never played it at launch, right? But it was always that one game that I looked at and I said, I'm a PS3 gamer. Damn it, I got to get that damn Xbox console. It is just freaking amazing looking. And then I remember I got this game with it was like the triple pack. It came with Gears 1, an expansion, and this. I never actually played the Gears 1 or the expansion, but man, I enjoyed the hell out of this game because right now we're watching some gameplay for the YouTube version, and it still looks awesome. And this is gameplay from 2011. What do you guys think about Gears of War 2 or Gears of War in general and the 360?
It is definitely a cornerstone of the 360. It was like you won. It was a game that I saw as a PS3 owner and wish I could play. It was still that time where you would go over to friends' houses to play video games, and I would go over to my friend's house that had an Xbox 360 and try out Gears 1 multiplayer, and was totally blown away by this because even though it's kind of a joke now, the gray, like sepia tone shooters.
The footage right now that for those
they just lowered the
video
saturation.
version, it is like the game looks beautiful, but it is straight gray and nothing else.
but back when Gears came out, and even to the point of Gears 2, that was still kind of novel. Not everybody had done that yet. We were entering in that direction, but it was still something that wasn't like a meme at that point, and they looked really cool at that point. Like the gun chainsaws, the big bros with the do-rags of steel just ripping people's head offs and kicking their heads right through their buttholes, and all of those great execution kills. Gears of War ruled. And then when I finally got my 360 a few years into the console, that was around the time that Gears 2 was coming out. So for me, that was a no-brainer pickup that Juan and I ended up playing the entire campaign of, and it's one of my favorite game memories to this day.
It really is.
Gears of War, it's certainly an important game, and although I never owned a 360, this is one of those games that I did go to a friend's house and we played the co-op Gears of War, and it's a lot of fun, and it was a big innovator for games, and we can make jokes about, like, to steal the joke from the zero punctuation reviews way back in the day, about how everything in Gears of War is made of chest-high walls so that you can hide behind everything. It did bring about, like, cover shooters as being a popular thing. We saw that get adopted in other games, like Grand Theft Auto 4 adopted the cover shooting system after we saw, we've done past reviews on Grand Theft Auto games. The shooting was horrible, and it took mechanics from Gears of War to make it actually decent in the future Grand Theft Auto games. So it really brought about a lot of new games adopting that system, a lot of older games even upgrading their combat system to emulate Gears of War.
I love that you mentioned that about the chest-high walls because, we'll be talking about Mass Effect 2. We kind of just talked about the fact that that is going to be our final review. And something that I think about with games like that, Tomb Raider from the reboot, is when you walk into a room and no wall is higher than like 4.5 feet, you're like, oh, here we go, people. Yep. Time for another combat scene.
It's fight time.
Maybe.
Yeah, it's the same thing. Like Uncharted, it's the same thing with like all those games,
Yeah, it's amazing what happens in a long, narrow hallway with lots of corners, lots of like chest walls. Bad things happen in there.
That's just part of it. And for everybody watching and listening, as we mentioned, we do have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/Quest Rewind, so you can definitely subscribe there. If you are on the podcast apps, we really just love any kind of love and support, so you can drop that 5-star review. I believe you can even review now on Spotify. Usually it's Apple Podcasts and all that stuff.
That's a thing now. Spotify has ratings. I found that out.
Time.
I stumbled onto that the other day, and sure enough, if you love what we do, you can go on Spotify now and give us a thumbs up out of 5. I'll let you decide what that number is, but a thumbs up out of 5.
Thumbs up out of 5. That is the blurb. That is the snippet from the newspaper article. And then we also have the Discord. The link right there is on the description. So I thought it would be cool to just go on a quick trip down memory lane just to whet our appetite about the Xbox 360 and all that stuff. And here I have the highest rated games on Metacritic. And this is just a quick at a glance. And then we can think about, like, is that what we associate with the Xbox 360? Or do we think there are other games that should definitely be a part of this conversation? So just glossing quickly, I got to start at number 14, just because I feel like that is Modern Warfare 2. It's actually at number 14.
Okay.
Number 13. Now, this is a game where I feel like one of you two got to talk about it, because I Never played this. I've actually never played Halo 3, people. So, Halo. We mentioned a lot about the significance of Halo 1 and 2 on the OG console. What's your guys' take on the third one on the 360?
I mean, it was just a little franchise that ended up on the Xbox eventually, and there was no hubbub about it, and everybody just kind of moved on with their life. No, Halo Halo 3, absolutely. That was when Halo was at its like peak fandom. Like we did get a few more Halo games on the 360, but that you could kind of see the decline there. I would go as far as saying that Crackdown is one of the most important or top Xbox 360 games just because it came with the Halo 3 demo. Like, there is a legion of people that went out and bought Crackdown just so they could play the Halo 3 beta.
Smartest marketing tactic ever.
Insane how smart that is. And Crackdown, ended up being a pretty good game, so it worked out for people like me that did that. But just the... Like we mentioned in our previous episode, the bro gamer, quote unquote, really started, and the Xbox fan, the identity of them really started with Halo 3 and the marketing campaign that went around it, and just the promise that was delivered on finally with the Halo 3 multiplayer. Because yes, there was online multiplayer with Halo 2, but that was when it was still at the cutting edge. And with Halo 3, they got to the point where, like, okay, we got this figured out. Now we're just going to make a real good one of these. And that's exactly what they did. The campaign in Halo kind of is what it is. It's fun. It's really fun to do with friends and go through the missions with different skulls and stuff, but the story has never been my cup of tea, so I wouldn't say it's bad. It's just it's another one of those games where you're going to for the multiplayer, and I think that's really going to be a common theme as we go through this episode.
It was part of the generation.
It 100% was part of the generation, and for the first time, really, as a core selling feature of the console. A lot of these games you go to for the multiplayer, and it's just a nice treat when the single player is good along with it, and Halo 3 is a great example of that.
Halo 3 is, I think, the last Halo game I played, but I only played a little bit of it. But obviously people speak very highly of it. The only thing I really have to add to it is I know, although Halo 3 is definitely very fondly remembered, just browsing like gaming Reddits and like kind of nostalgia stuff, I think a lot of people also think that peak Halo on the 360 was that Halo ODST. A lot of people do speak very highly of that. And I just remember the commercials. They were showing those commercials all the time, but I'm not sure what it was with that. Was it like kind of like an add-on or like a DLC or something? I forget what it was.
It was an arcade game. It was a downloadable game. It was kind of like it was a more story-focused Halo experience. So yeah, it wasn't of the Master Chief. It was almost like a crime scene investigation, which is cool, where you play as different ODST orbital drop shock troopers, ODST, and members, and then you just like relive their stories kind of, and it was a fun little game. Just, it's one of those instances where it wasn't my Halo, when 3 being my Halo.
It's part of it. It's part
not
of it.
my Halo.
Hashtag not my Halo. A quick my Halo story just to show how deep I got into Halo 3. This was really like the last game in the phase of my life where I would stay up all night at a friend's house playing games, where I did this multiple times with Halo. Everybody has that one friend that was just very, very good at Halo and would just take names when you were playing online, and then it got to the point where we were playing so much one night that like I just progressively got better and better and better and was able to match him after a good like 10 hours of straight play. It's one of my best gaming moments and proof that I played way too much Halo back in the day.
That was also another staple when you think about the Xbox 360. It wasn't just a matter of multiplayer kind of going with the achievements and the gamer scores and all that. It truly was, I don't just want to play, I want to be the best there. I want to be, hey, we played all night. And for that, you had to pour hours. I mean, I got to a point where I was damn good at Modern Warfare 1 and 2, but I don't have that availability now, right? I don't have just the 8-9 hours of energy and then maybe sleeping an hour to go to college, in my case at that point. And it's just one of those things that it really just, yeah, I can understand why kids now, when they play Fortnite, and I feel really old saying this, you'll see them be amazing. It's like, yeah, they actually have the time, which we sometimes don't. And one game I feel like I got to bring up is Oblivion, because we mentioned the bloomy graphics, right? Let's forget about the graphical part. Something, and this is where you can really see, and I would love to get your feedback first, Keith. You can see a real split of when people started playing games, let's say on the PS4 generation forward with like Breath of the Wild, and people back, because Oblivion to me was the first game that truly was open world, in that you go out and you can go wherever. If you want to kill this person and suffer the consequences, you do you. You want to do the side quest, you do you. There are other games that gave you choices, but really they were still linear. Here, I felt overwhelmed that, holy crap, this legitimately is up to me. If I just want to walk around for hours and talk to NPCs and progress nothing in the story, but I'm still having a blast with like the Brotherhood and all this other stuff, Oblivion, for not its graphics, but for the gameplay and the decision making, and I know a lot of this did come from Morrowind, but Oblivion was my first time, I was blown away, and I still get upset that people kind of credit Breath of the Wild now for that. I don't think we would have Breath of the Wild were it not for Oblivion and Elder Scrolls. What say you, Mr. Hammy?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Morrowind, because I imagine there is at least a few people out there screaming at you saying, everything you just said was in Morrowind!
That's why I said this was my first, people. This was my first.
And I'm with you, where Oblivion was my first experience with that. And I agree with everything you said. Just, even though there was like that jank, that Bethesda jank was in full force when it came to Oblivion.
Hell yeah.
When it first came out, it was something very special. It was that vast open world where you could do anything. You could... It pulled you in a lot of different directions depending on what kind of character you played. Like, you could go the mage path, you could go the thief path, you could join the Brotherhood of Darkness. Like, the game was pushing you forward in a bunch of different quest lines, but everything you did was like, it was your choice. You could skip that entire thing. You could skip entire quest lines. You could get 100 hours out of that game and not even touch the main story. And I have done that on multiple characters in that game. And that's what I think the magic of Oblivion is. It really opened a world up and created choice inside of it. You don't have to steal that cheese wheel from the man in the city, but if you want that cheese wheel, boy, you can get that cheese wheel. Exactly. And yeah, like you mentioned, it really paved the way for games like Breath of the Wild. The same way that GTA copied Gears, I imagine if Morrowind and Oblivion didn't set that path forward for games like Breath of the Wild, it would have just stuck to the same was getting boring formula, and it really just opened things up into this new generation.
Yeah, with the Elder Scrolls series, I think that large amount of freedom it's been there for a while, even back to like Daggerfall, which was the second one, I believe. But it's always been a little rough around the edges and kind of stayed as like this more niche type of game. But Oblivion, I think, was like really the first one where it was like a mainstream success, and it started opening up more than just kind of like that fan base that was already there for it, where I think Oblivion was the first one to really introduce it to a lot more new fans to become fans of the Elder Scrolls series. And I think a lot of people might say, like, although Skyrim today is just remembered for being this amazing game, as each entry to Elder Scrolls has happened, I do think there's been kind of like restrictions along the way. And some people might argue, even though I've not personally played Oblivion, I've heard a lot of people say that, like, oh, you could do more things in Oblivion, or they limited this.
I've
or
even
they
heard
limited
that about Morrowind. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, as they've gone along, they've had to tighten things up to maybe improve some other things. And
that was going to be my point.
Yeah, so Oblivion might be that sweet spot for a lot of people that they might enjoy it more than Skyrim. But yeah, Oblivion was like the first time the Elder Scrolls was like a game I was considering getting into. I had heard about Morrowind and all that it was about, but I was kind of like, it doesn't really interest me. But I didn't actually really get into the series until Skyrim.
But to continue the conversation of Bethesda on the 360, like, I really think this is when Bethesda games were at their best. Like, it started with Oblivion, then we got Fallout 3, which is one of the greatest games ever as far as I'm concerned. They tweaked that Oblivion formula a little bit and turned it into a more gun-focused wasteland experience, and Fallout 3, is the best one, in my opinion. I have heard a lot of cases otherwise, but I still think Fallout 3 is the best one. And then we eventually got Skyrim, which again took that
New
formula.
Vegas
New Vegas. Exactly. Even though that was like kind of a spin-off game. It was
a lot of people say that's the best one. A lot of people say New Vegas is the best one.
But that's an Obsidian game, I believe, and not it was like a Bethesda-esque game.
Yeah.
And then we got that. We got Fallout 4, we got Skyrim. Like, the Bethesda formula really shined in the Xbox 360 generation, and some of their best work as far as I'm concerned. So much so that they're still releasing Skyrim today.
That's pretty much the case, and always a sign of whenever you have a formula that's so good, it's difficult to top yourself. And they did it twice in the same generation, for better or worse. And this generation, I think, kind of with like Oblivion, the technology, I think, finally matched the presentation, even though it wasn't perfect. But another game, we brought up Gears of War as another game that you look at that, and my thought is you would never make that happen on the PS2 or the Xbox. Just technologically speaking, it's a dream. You would have to make a lot of sacrifices. Another series that I think will be very similar is the Batman Arkham games, just because those are other games you will look at and say, this is the leap in the generation. I think one of the biggest complaints people have when you shift from one generation to another is, that game looks like it could happen on the previous one. And we're still seeing that, right? It's always that challenge. And it's not until you see something like this, the presentation, the animation, the gameplay, the variety, that you say, we've truly made a leap. On the Metacritic thing, Batman Arkham City is the one that's listed in the top 10 at number 9 with a 94. Now, I played Batman Arkham Asylum, and from the voiceover to the presentation, it truly was, it wasn't just a Batman IP that they slapped on a game. It truly did feel like I was playing Bruce Wayne, Batman. I mean, the freaking voice acting alone is worth the price of admission. What did you guys think about those games? Have you played any of them on the generation?
I'll leave this one to Keith because I have not. I have it. It's one of my gaming sins. I've not played any of those Batman games.
Oh,
you got to make it happen. You got to make it happen.
You need to make that happen. They are so good. I played Arkham Asylum on the PS3, so in my head I associate it with that, but it's one of those experiences where you're sitting there and you can't believe what you're playing. It is so good. Like, you get lost in a game and time just kind of slips away. That was my experience when I played Arkham Asylum for the first time. And somehow, Arkham City made it even better for me. They took everything great about Arkham Asylum, turned it into an open world, and then just doubled down on the characters, doubled down on the interactions. If the Joker is your thing, this is like one of the best Joker stories to happen in a video game. And in some aspects, they maybe went a little too far, like those 1,000 riddle trophies or whatever you had to get in Arkham City. That was a bit too much, but just everything is so good about Arkham City, to the point where like it even has the best post credits as far as I'm concerned. There's no post credit scene or anything like that. This was before then, but just when the credits are playing in that game, it is one of my favorite moments in a game ever. And oh god, yeah, if you haven't played Arkham City, go just do that. Experience it. Play Asylum, play City. You can skip Origins, you can skip Arkham Knight. They kind of lose the thread after after those, but those
And they also
two
had a
are
side-scrolling 2D one called Blackgate or something, which was on Vita and PC. Never played that, but
don't worry about that one. It's probably a piece of trash if it was on the Vita. But at least
hey, whoa.
Throwing that Vita shade. But yeah, if there are games that you are thinking about listing to this list, like I need to go check those out, put the 2 Arkham games on the top of that list.
I think the most mind-blowing thing for me was the scope from one game to another. Because the first one, Batman Arkham Asylum, as the name implies, it's very constrained, but by design. It is where you are. That with City is, hey, this is legit now, just what you liked about the first game. I didn't play a lot of the second one, but this is actually around the time where I met my wife, who was my friend just getting to become a girlfriend, and this was the first game where she would always be playing it, and I would just be sitting there looking at that going, holy crap, just how did they take that small element from Asylum and expand it to the entire world? I do think they tried to triple down with at Arkham Knight, with like the Batmobile. I think it is like people say too much birthday cake. When you want to give people so much that you think they want, you're like, no, you know what? I'm actually perfectly okay getting this in as good a shape as possible. So
that's a really good analogy for exactly what Arkham Knight is, because you had a good portion of cake when you ate City and you were left feeling good about it, but with Knight, they went for that second slice, and when you eat too much cake and halfway through that second slice, you just feel like crap. That's exactly what
second
Arkham
slice.
Knight
I'm
did.
like by fourth before that happens, dude.
Well, you're a monster then.
Yeah.
Or make bigger slices of cake. I don't know what to tell you, but it's one of the two.
Yeah, it's relative to the size. But another game. This is number 8, and I feel like we gotta not just talk about Portal 2. Here it's at number 8 with a score of 95. Just talking about Portal, this came to us originally from the Orange Box, which the 360 and the PC had the best versions. The PS3 had a version, which I own, and it runs
I own
technically.
Too.
Yeah, it was
Portal
not great.
was fine. I thought Portal was fine on the PS3.
Yeah, Portal ran. Like there was one part
good.
that dropped a little bit, but it was all right.
Would you consider Portal 2 a triumph? Would you
absolutely.
make a note here of a huge success?
Keith is doing the Keith thing. You're doing the Keith thing.
Would it be hard to overstate your satisfaction?
Right, in your case, like Portal as a whole, you mentioned you played at least the first one. Not sure if you did the second one. What did you think about these games that really were just, I'm not going to say tech demos, but I don't think anybody expected Portal to be the defining thing of the Orange Box generation, let alone getting an actual sequel.
Yeah. It's not necessarily something I like directly associate with the 360, but it was an important game for that era, and Portal was super fun. It was just this nice little game that they threw in there as a bonus, but it ended up being the thing that was talked about the most and had its own memes, as Keith was alluding to the song at the end.
Painfully,
And then Portal 2 comes out and really takes things to the next level. I still kind of, when it comes to like the story, I just like the nice little story that the first one was. But I do think the second one was a fun story as well. And I do like some of the mechanics that they added to the game with like those like gels or whatever, like that were on the floor. Like one was like a bounce one, I think, and one made you go like super fast, if I'm not mistaken. It's been a long time since I played it, but it was really like, here's what, like, just taking everything to the next level. And we haven't seen a Portal game since, but it's like I feel like they did everything they needed to do with Portal, and those two games are pretty much perfect the way that they are.
Yeah, I agree. I don't really associate it with an Xbox 360 because, like you guys mentioned, the orange box was passable with the on the consoles, but it was really a PC game, and I got hoodwinked into buying Portal 2 for the PS3 because of that promise that they were bringing Steam to the PS3 through Portal 2 that they did literally nothing with after the game came out. So I never picked this up for the 360, but
it did run okay. This one ran fine for me on the PS3.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, by that point, when we got to Portal 2 and all that, I do feel people figured out the console. But despite that, people always felt more safe. If it was a multi-platform game, the Xbox 360 was generally the better option.
Yeah.
So that happened a lot. So we can keep talking about the list. I'm just curious. There's games that are not going to show up in this top 10, right? You know, one game that I know Keith and I in particular are very fond of, even though I played it on the PS3, I also own a 360 version, is Asura's Wrath, which has become one of the most expensive games to buy for either console. It's made by Capcom, I believe it is, and I don't even know how to explain it.
I was about to ask you, how would you explain Asura's Wrath other than...
It's a galactic, quick time event driven narrative action
where
game.
You fight a planet through quick time events?
You do fight people in a planet, but eventually you can literally fight a planet. The planet can become the actual enemy. And I'm just going to leave it at that.
I think, okay, let me try this one. Imagine anime was like, yo, you took it a little too far. That's kind of what Asura's Wrath is. It's just like, if you injected Dragon Ball Z with Dragon Ball Z steroids, that's what you would get. You would get Asura's Wrath. It's just the most... you really need to just see it to believe it. It's really... impossible to explain other than it's just the most anime-ass anime you've ever seen.
I think it's something great.
It's like if if you guys ever seen those clips of like the Bollywood movies with just like insane action stunts that are just completely impossible. So maybe it's like you mix a Bollywood action movie with anime and maybe that helps paint a picture.
It really would be take a crazy looking Dragon Ball Z episode and turn that thing up 10. It doesn't start like that, but there's games like that. For you guys, what are other games that you're thinking, that's not going to show up in the top 10 just because it's maybe not the best game, but it is something that when you think about the console, it definitely comes to mind for you?
So I don't know if Dead Rising is on the top 10, but to me... look that up. Or the top 12, whatever number we're on at this point.
It is nowhere on there.
Okay, then Dead Rising is my pick because this was a game that it had parts of it that were really clunky, but the bones were good. Like it had a very good idea of, hey, we're going to take this Dawn of the Dead, you're trapped in a mall with a bunch of zombies, and we're going to just let you do whatever you want to do. Just kill a bunch of zombies in any way you want. You're in a mall, you have access to all these weapons. It's a golf club, a shovel, whatever, a vehicle in the parking lot, run over a bunch of zombies. Like, it was just your playground for killing zombies. And that idea is amazing and incredibly fun. But then the actual story of the game and the actual like mission structure of only having this set time limit.
I cannot stand that. I get why that was there. I get it.
Yeah.
But
yeah, exactly. Like they have this set time limit, and the actual like missions of the game were like brutally difficult. There was like escort missions that were super annoying, and the bosses of this game are like so ridiculously tough. Like I couldn't beat a single boss unless you found a way to just like cheese the crap out of them, because if you tried to take them straight on, you were gonna just die so fast. So it was like it had a ton of room for improvement, but like I said, the bones were super good. And even if like the rest of the game was crap, just being able to run around and take down zombies was enough fun to keep you busy for a long time.
Yeah, it's weird because it's easy to forget that Dead Rising was a run-based game where you had to hit your marks, and if you wanted the best ending, you needed to do all those escort quests and make sure you were in the right place at the right time. But honestly, I think that's one of the worst ways to play Dead Rising. Like just going around and starting your run and maybe taking on a psychopath, seeing all the fun ways that you can interact with zombies and killing them, because I really think that's what makes Dead Rising special. The fact that it's not just your axes and your guns and your machetes and your typical zombie killing weapons. You start throwing in things like in there like mannequins and street signs and plants,
And they kept getting more outrageous with the other games. By Dead Rising 3, holy crap, yeah.
Exactly. The whole thing about Dead Rising 2 was that you were like a carpenter and you could like makeshift weapons together, and it was awesome. And then it always had these like bonus weapons. I think if you get the highest zombie killing achievement, you unlock the Mega Buster from Mega Man that you could use on zombies, and that was always fun to do. It was for a game that's just about killing zombies, and those are a dime a dozen, they found a very fun way to make it unique, and Dead Rising absolutely deserves recognition for that.
And I think another game that really exemplifies the shift in generation, kind of like Oblivion, and I agree completely with you, Keith, the most fun thing about Dead Rising is not playing the game rather than experiencing it, as in just be there. Just be there. Just walk around. What the hell is that? Can I grab it? Can I use it? Great. When you take the whole element of, hey, time's running out, buddy. You can do this in another run. And that turned me off so much. Like, every single time I thought to myself, I am enjoying the game, and the game is the worst enemy.
Yeah, it's like all I wanted is like a free mode to just... They needed like a mode of just like see how long you can survive or something like that. And I didn't end up... Maybe I played a little bit of 2 and I never played 3, but I don't know if they eventually got to those ideas. But yeah, one of the things, again, like this... it could only exist on this next-gen console was really like the sheer amount of zombies that they could put on screen in the game is something you just never would have been able to do on the previous platform. So that in and of itself was one of those kind of early-ish next-gen games and made it feel next-gen with just how many enemies could be present on screen.
I'm trying to remember the exact number, but going off the top of my head, I think the achievement for getting the Mega Buster is like you need to kill 63,000 zombies in one run. Like just thinking about that number of enemies on screen, it's amazing to think about.
One game
the parking garage. That was the trick. Just go in the parking garage and do your business.
That's probably part of it. Just figuring out what's that corner, where can you go and kind of get spammy, but. Another game kind of shifting dramatically, but it is on the more open world side. Here at number 7, we have Red Dead Redemption. I'll be honest in saying I've never played neither the first or the second, but this was one of those games where you have GTA on the side, right? You have GTA 4 specifically around this time and all that stuff. But then this game came out, and I don't remember a lot of people talking about it. I think it was years after where people really began to truly appreciate the game. And of course, I'm just saying as like one of my hobbies is just subscribing and watching gaming YouTube channels. And I feel like this game came out in 2010. In 2015, 2016, you'd really start seeing a lot of coverage of, no, you got to go to the 360. You got to play this game. Because there was a version on the PS3, but much like other games, I do believe it ran a little bit poorly. Did either of you play Red Dead?
I played a little bit of the base game. For me, the thing that sticks out about Red Dead was Undead Nightmare, their add-on Halloween pack, and just how good it was. It's one of those games that really shines of just like a game that's an 8 and then DLC comes out and it makes it a 10. That was the Red Dead experience for me.
Being a big GTA fan, I was really looking forward to Red Dead Redemption. I did play through the whole game. I did play it on PS3, but it was a really good game. And Keith is absolutely right. Undead Nightmare is probably one of the best DLCs I've ever played. I remember like I wasn't even gonna get it, and then I got it for Christmas or my birthday or something. I don't remember when it came out, but and I was like, oh, okay, I'll play it, and it ended up being like way more than I thought it was gonna be. It was, it wasn't as long as like the main story, but it had like a lot of content to it, so it was pretty darn impressive for a DLC. And yeah, the regular game still holds up pretty well too. I think the game still looks pretty darn good considering, we're now 2 generations out from it. Yeah, I mean now like Red Dead 2, although that's a game I actually haven't played yet. Red Dead 2 makes this game look, completely outdated, but I think for its time, it was just a really like fun game. And it's like if you like GTA, and it was just like a fun Old West version of Grand Theft Auto, and it played very much like Grand Theft Auto, but was a lot of fun to just see it in a totally different context than like a modern city with cars and stuff like that.
I think to your point, it's the setting that really helped it age as well as it did, because by design, the Old West looks kind of shitty. So it doesn't age poorly as it goes on. Like the way that GTA 4 is an example, the way that it's gray New York didn't really age all that well. Like the Wild West is supposed to look dirty and sandy and crappy, and like nobody else wants to live there. So it almost like works in its favor, the fact that it looks that way and still presents that way almost in its best way possible.
No, and the building complexity, because you look at something like GTA 3, and yes, it's trying to look like New York, but it is a PS2 generation game. With Red Dead on the 360, there's so much open space, right?
Yeah.
So that's where you can hide
it's easier to make
a
it
lot of
look
those faults.
better. And I will say, those who played know there is like a fantastic moment in that game where you first get to Mexico and it just plays this song. This song only plays once in the game as you're like heading to like into town in Mexico. It's just a really cool like atmospheric moment for the game.
And honestly, I think it's one of those rare things in video games where you can't just YouTube it. Like you need to play that game to really feel the weight of it.
Experience it. Yeah, but it's like one of those like if there was a top 50 moments in video games, it's on that list without question.
Now, this is one of the heavy hitters, and after this we should probably talk about GTA 4, but I don't think you can talk about the Xbox 360 without bringing up Bioshock. This was one of the other games where when this game came out, holy crap, it just felt like if you didn't play this game, you were not one of the cool kids when it came to like story-driven games or something, because the amount of people, especially online, right? No, and hey, Ryan, so you feel better.
I think we're in the presence of a not cool kid right here.
Ryan, you're one of those cool kids. Well, I was one of those cool kids.
I bought the game twice and I still haven't played it.
Oh, okay, Keith. That's kind of shitty though, because how does somebody buy a game twice? Twice. But to make you feel better, Ryan, I didn't play this game for the first time till 2018. And usually in this podcast, and we were still a cast of the past, I will say these words, which is, I'm almost thankful I didn't play a game back then so I can experience it now. I kind of felt the opposite, not going to lie, where the first half of Bioshock is amazing. The atmosphere, just everything about it. The silence to the music, to the enemy, to the design, the mechanics, the combat. I'm not going to say
building.
Yeah, the world. I'm not going to say it's a perfect game, but this is probably as perfect of an experience as you can get. Then you can kind of feel when they thought, we got to get a little bit more time out of you. And by the last 2 to 3 hours, I didn't feel like that. And I don't think I would feel like that if I played the game when it came out. Keep in mind, I played so many more games by this point that I can see tropes, right? I'm like, oh, this is an outdated mechanic. This is an outdated mechanic. And I would have loved to experience it back in the day. Keith, in your case, talk to me, buddy. What do you think about Bioshock?
on the same page. If you are one of the people like Ryan, not in the cool kids club, and have never played Bioshock, there's a moment in that game where there's a big reveal. It is totally okay to not play that game past the reveal. In fact, I think it is a better experience for it because
credits should roll.
And that's
amazing experience.
Yep, and then just hang it up. But it's one of those games where I think I don't know if this is the right way to put it, but I'm going to just throw it out there. Pop culture has almost ruined the Bioshock experience, where it was so innovative. It was so mind-blowing when it came out, with the world building and the characters and the narratives, that video game culture has almost lessened it as time has moved on, because so many things have pulled from Bioshock, so many things have iterated on Bioshock, and so many things have tried to be Bioshock, that going back to where that all started, it almost lessens the experience now, not having the experience of like playing it for the very first time back when it was first out. Like it's a game like Undertale. I guess Undertale would be another great example of that for me, where it's just been pulled from and memed and iterated on to death.
Yeah, to the point that people don't even know, oh, you're copying this game. Kind of like I mentioned before with, oh, it's a Breath of the Wild clone. It's like, okay, Breath of the Wild popularized some things, but a lot of these elements are not exactly new.
Exactly, and I think Bioshock is a very large starting point for a whole generation of games that followed, but at the time it was just so phenomenal, that storytelling experience up until that point, up until the big reveal. Then you can turn it off, but just having to getting to experience that, really turning the environment into a pivotal character of that story. Like, even though you are interacting with it and it never interacts back, like, I would say my favorite character of those games is Rapture, and just the environment that they've built it for Bioshock, and then the big daddies, and having to take on the big daddies, and trying to find all the creative, innovative builds that you could work towards to make fighting those big daddies easier. Like, the combat is something that gets lost in the Bioshock conversation a lot, but I'm actually a big fan of it, and all of the different ways that you could play those games. It really is a phenomenal game that I'm happy that I experienced before the world tore it apart.
I'm just curious, Ryan, which versions did you buy, not once but twice?
PS3 and PC.
See, you got it. You just got to play it.
Yeah.
I haven't played the sequel, so hypothetically, just saying.
A lot of people talk highly of Infinite, so people say don't play 2, just play Infinite.
Yeah, 2's all right. Infinite, I don't know about Infinite. It's in hindsight,
take it up with everyone else. I have no idea.
Take it up to HR, Keith. Don't take that up with us.
If anybody listening loves Bioshock Infinite, I'd love to have a conversation with it all these years later, especially from a story angle of, does it hold up the way that you remember?
And speaking of holding up, I think like this next game, we got to talk about GTA 4. We've gone long enough. I kind of feel bad for this game because, look, I was in that bunch. I want to play this game next year, 2022, or technically 2020. This year. I meant to say that's part of the switches, right? But you have the GTA Trilogy, which is GTA 3 through San Andreas. And for better or worse, we have the definitive editions. But even before then, people played that. And we have the GTA 5 trilogy, which is just GTA 5 coming out in 3 different generations. And then in the middle,
Dr. Dre's in it now, okay? That's serious business.
Yeah,
it just keeps
they just
scaling
do
up.
Online stories. And
exactly.
So
but then somewhere in the middle is this forgotten game, I feel, where I don't want to say like Rockstar just pretends it doesn't exist, but it is interesting that it's between generations. Even though this one came out in the same one as GTA 5, but GTA 4, at least for me, I thought took away. And once again, I haven't played this since I want to say 7 to 8 years ago, because I did try to replay it. I felt like it stripped a lot of the quote unquote fun craziness that I loved from the previous games. It added that Gears of War monotone color palette. And even though I like the characters, I wasn't having a lot of fun just driving around, which to me was what GTA was. What's you guys?
This one's all you, buddy.
All right, I was gonna be like, I'm gonna take a while, so I'm gonna leave. I want to make sure everyone got their words in.
Grab your popcorn. Okay, right. What else do they need before they hear this?
No, it's okay. So
Get your stretches in. All
GTA
right,
4 for me, I feel like GTA 4 is like the GTA, like the hardcore GTA fans GTA game, right? I've been on like the GTA Reddit a lot recently because I was interested in the definitive edition, but obviously it was a huge cluster. So I was kind of trying to keep tabs on it to see if they were actually going to patch it, and then I might pick it up. But I see on specifically like the GTA subreddit, there's a lot of love for GTA 4, but then you go to like r/gaming and there's a lot more love for San Andreas. And don't get me wrong, I think San Andreas is a fantastic game. But what they were going for with GTA 4 was they wanted to build a new foundation for like a really strong like launching point where they had more realistic physics, realistic driving, and all the NPCs had their own schedules and did their own thing. And if you followed an NPC long enough, there was like all these like amazing details. Like if a police officer arrested someone, you could literally follow that police car and they would go all the way down to the station to like take that person in. Like there was all these crazy details that they added. And I think the story is also the best story in any GTA game. I know people call you and ask you to go bowling all the time.
Oh, you took my joke.
Yeah, that's something they definitely could have downplayed a little bit. But to me, GTA 4 is I enjoyed it a lot more than GTA 5. And 5, of course, the online for 5 is way better. But I didn't really like the story for GTA 5, and that's just my personal opinion.
I wasn't a big fan of the switching. I thought initially it was a cool concept. After a while, I just wanted to play a story.
Yeah. And it just didn't grip me in the same way that GTA 4 did. Like when I played through GTA 4, I enjoyed it so much, and I realized like the different paths you could have taken with the story that I went back and like replayed the whole game almost instantly, which I pretty much never do with any game.
Important question. Do you save or kill Dwayne?
I killed Dwayne.
You're a monster.
And then I
son
went
of
back.
A bee sting.
Yeah, going back, the only way to play it is to kill Playboy. For a 15-year-old game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the only way to do it is to kill Playboy. That's the correct way. I wasn't paying enough attention to that part.
Good.
Anyway, one thing I want to do is I actually never played the DLC stories.
It's Ballad of Gay Tony and
people say
Lost
like
and the
take it
Damned.
or leave it with the Lost and the Damned, but a lot of people say the Ballad of Gay Tony is actually like peak GTA 4. So I'm really excited to at some point go back, and they added a little bit more of like the bells and whistles to the ballad. I think you can do like skydiving and stuff like that in that. So some of those little things that were missing from San Andreas did actually come back. And yeah, I will always go to bat for GTA 4. And I feel like it was, this was the last GTA game before Rockstar kind of lost their way and only care about online now. So it was the last time that they were really focused on creating like fun, like really character driven stories. And the other interesting thing about that DLC is if you play through GTA 4, you actually come across those characters in the story. And then like you play the other one and like you see all the different angles of the times where all those characters
by the time this is happening, you get to see maybe in the background.
Yeah, because there's this whole story with the diamond that's like these diamonds that you see at the beginning of GTA 4, but you actually never get the resolution with Nico's storyline, but you do by the end of like the ballad get the resolution with the diamonds. And I actually haven't played it yet, so I still don't know. But I'm excited to eventually do that. So it's cool that they had this little like through line that's with all those 3 stories. And I think that's a better way to tell the story than just switching between three characters, like they did in 5.
Mm-hmm. I don't have much of a GTA 4 experience. I picked it up when it first came out, being very excited that, hey, this is the new generation of Grand Theft Auto. Played a bit of the game. The pace is significantly different. Like going from San Andreas to GTA 4 is a very daunting experience because they tried to seep it more in realism. Like, oh, a viable way to start that game is to take a cab everywhere, and now you're going to go on taxi rides and stuff instead of driving around like a psychopath. Was a very different tone in that game, and it kind of lost me back in the day. I went back and played it. I probably got about 3/4 of the way through, enough to make the very important decision in that game that we spoke about earlier, and I'm glad that, Ryan, you've come around and make the right choice these days, and be able to work on that, and then it just kind of lost me. And then by the time the DLC came out, I was just so uninterested in GTA 4, and I feel like they tried to land the multiplayer, but they just didn't quite get it yet. Like, I remember my multiplayer experience being very disappointed. I think I was playing with you, Juan, at one point, and we realized there's no military like in the online, and was very disappointed about that.
I literally got taken back to us in Yahoo chat. I remember I even went, holy crap. It's one of those thoughts that you don't think about till somebody says it. And I remember we got so upset because we spent hours. We had free time, right? We just spent hours trying to get that damn thing. And you could never scale it that much.
The online was definitely something that needed a lot of work. Because my cousin and I, we still had some fun with it. Yeah, my cousin. But yeah, we had been obsessed with GTA since Vice City. So when you guys might even forget, San Andreas actually had a multiplayer mode that you could do. Like, you would be stuck on the same screen. Like, you'd have to go to these little icons that were hidden around San Andreas, but it was very limited. Yeah, there was actually a multiplayer mode to San Andreas. A lot of people don't even know it was there.
I did not know that.
Yeah. And we were like, oh, that's all. It was like, we just got a little piece of like being able to play GTA together. That's all like we ever wanted to do. And then, so the fact that they had a free mode in GTA 4 online was like enough for us to just have a lot of fun. But yeah, it was super limited compared to even like the first iteration of GTA 5's online was like leaps and bounds ahead of GTA 4. So yeah, the online for GTA 4, not great. I'll mainly go to bat just for like the single player.
And look, we could talk about some of our favorite games for the console for hours because we haven't touched on Xbox arcade games, and this is where you have games like Bastion, which Bastion was maybe the first game that I truly fell in love with, like on that smaller scale. That's when I started to follow not just your Square Enixes and your Capcoms, but I really started to appreciate these smaller developers. There was a game like Battlefield 1943, and that's not a typo or a misspelling. This was taking Battlefield in a smaller scale, but still within that Battlefield scale of it made sense with the vehicles and all that stuff. And it was Xbox Live Arcade, online.
That
and
map
that was one
is
of my
burned
first
into
ones.
my brain. It is one map, and I remember every inch of it.
Yep. And even though it was like kind of basic, I liked the simplicity of it. It wasn't like a full price game. It wasn't trying to be. Are there any loose ends, any other games that you want to just get a quick blurb, 360, whether it be digital or anything else?
If you are a fan of GTA like the GTA Vice City 3 San Andreas games, and ever thought to yourself, man, I love those games, but I wish they had a 10-foot dildo bat in them, you need to go play Saints Row the Third. And for many other reasons beyond that, what I just said, you need to go play Saints Row the Third. That's maybe one of the most fun experiences I've had with the console, just because it's insane. It's just... if you think like this is the craziest thing I've ever seen in a game, Saints Row will be like, nah, we can do better than that. It's just this weird, this fun story that doesn't take itself seriously in the slightest. Like, there's a gang of lucha libre people in that
those
game.
damn missions and everything. Oh,
and
so good.
It concludes in a wrestling ring being trained by Hulk Hogan, and that's just one quest in that game. It is the most ridiculous
In that game,
thing.
it really doesn't become outdated. I played it like 2 years ago. It's so outrageous, and you can't help but smile. It's one of those games that, yeah, you have fun, but you're just smiling from the cutscenes, the music, the gameplay. If you're a wrestling fan, you DDT people, you suplex them. Even if you don't like wrestling, it's just stupidly fun. So I'm really happy you brought that one up. What about you, Ryan? Any other recommendations or experiences?
Going back to the Xbox Arcade, I played Limbo not too long ago. That's another great game that I believe first got its start on the 360, and I thought that was just an excellent little, like, very kind of dark platformer, but it had like a very kind of unique style to it, and was kind of like this little spooky platformer, but it's really, really cool, and I loved, again, kind of going to Xbox Arcade. Really opened up the opportunity for these smaller, like, artistic kind of games, and this is definitely one of many that were great. And I always got to mention, of course, they had the HD upscaled Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie. So just play those games, but Banjo-Tooie is a little bit what you said earlier, Juan, about too much birthday cake. They went a little too overzealous in Tooie, but it is still a great game, both of those games. And they never looked better than when they brought them to 360, and of course now you can do like the rare replay or whatever. But yeah.
And then once you're done with those, go play the infinitely superior Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts. Also a defining 360 game.
All right. Do we want to hash that out right now? That's not on my top games. Hashtag not my top 360 game.
We'll save that for another quest.
I'll hate it. And once again, I've not played this game, so I can't judge, but I have seen a movement online that's kind of saying, hey, it wasn't all that bad. It was just expectation versus what happened. I can't formulate any kind of opinion on this. I'm just throwing that out there. I read that on the internets, people. It happened.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. Think of if they made it, instead of getting Mass Effect 3, Keith, you got like Mass Effect the rhythm game. You know, that's what it feels like.
I'm just gonna say that I would be okay with that.
Yeah, I would be super okay with that.
Mass Effect.
All right, yeah, okay, all right.
Yeah, kill the Reapers. But no, I totally understand where you're coming from. It would be like
if they just made it, like and Master Chief's Nuts and Bolts, whatever. Like, I don't care, but
yeah, you don't want to. Yeah, let's leave Master Chief's Nuts and Bolts out of this one. It would be like if Zelda came out as like a fighting game next time.
Yeah.
Can that be the title of this episode? Master Chief's Nuts and Bolts?
I just love that. Ryan brought up two examples, hoping we would be like a pure agreement or disagreement. It's like, no, Mass Effect to the Rhythm, awesome. Master Chief's Nuts and Bolts probably
that's only
exists.
because everyone crapped on Mass Effect 3, right?
But you see, Nuts and Bolts was such a good idea. Like, if you came out with Halo Nuts and Bolts next and told me you can customize a Warthog and do whatever you want with it to finish a mission, I'd be like, I will buy 2 copies of that.
Yeah, but that's
that
like,
sounds
if it,
rad.
But if it replaced Halo 3, right? Like, imagine you're on the 360 and you're waiting for that first Halo release and it's Master Chief's Nuts and Bolts. Like, wouldn't you be like, come on, man?
I would be like, you rare fanboys got Viva Pinata, so shut up and let me have my Nuts and Bolts.
That's hardly a compromise.
One game or two games I got to bring up quickly. One just became backwards compatible, and I think I even said it on the podcast when we were still a cast of the past, like, this game's never going to become backwards compatible, because why would it? Then there's this list, 50 Cent Blood in the Sand. I thought to myself, are you kidding me? Look, I enjoyed that game. It's not a bad game. It's not a great game, but it's a cheap Gears clone starring 50 Cent with the worst boss fights ever, short
and
time.
a lot of ramps.
A lot of ramps and a lot of helicopters.
You gotta hit all of them. You gotta hit that ramp 50.
But it's a decent game. It's a decent experience. And now it's backwards compatible. And it's become one of the more expensive games for the Xbox 360. And then the other game that I really feel doesn't get talked about enough is Street Fighter 4. Just because I was actually just watching a lot of documentaries about Capcom and the shift from 2D to 3D. And Street Fighter after 3 really was kind of in limbo where maybe that was going to be it. Like for fighting games as a whole, we kind of forget in hindsight. We have like this revisionist history, but fighting games kind of died for a very long time. Like this fighting game community and all that really didn't exist for a long time.
Street Fighter 3 didn't hit the mark. Mortal Kombat went 3D and went bad. There was like a dark time in fighting games.
Yeah, it was a fun casual time. You had your melees and all that other stuff, but then Street Fighter 4 came out, and even I got hooked, and I was never, I mean, no, not going to say never. I was a big into Tekken Tag, but never as I want to get home. Tekken was in the arcade for me. It was never so much at home. But then Street Fighter 4, you and me, Keith, I mean, we spent hours. It was me playing as Sagat and just us trying to like outdo one another. That was a badass time.
Yeah, God, Street Fighter 4, much like yourself, I was never really big into fighting games. I really enjoyed Mortal Kombat, like 1, 2, and 3, the 2D versions of it, but I would just play it casually with friends. Street Fighter was the first time that I sat down, and I mean, I imagine a lot of this had to do with Xbox Live as well. Finally having the ability to go online and play against other people and play against Ken, spammers and M-Bison turtles to your heart's content, and just having that accessibility to play this very, very phenomenal, like, tight game that just felt so good. It was the first time in my life I considered buying a fighting stick, and if you've played Street Fighter 4, I imagine the thing happened to you that happened to me when Juan mentioned it, and Indestructible immediately started playing in your head, because I think that is really Indestructible ones have gonna break me down. That is the true legacy of the Street Fighter 4. Like, they took it out in Ultra, which was a crime, but just that menu music of Indestructible, that is the crowning achievement of 360 fighting games right there.
It really was. And Ryan, in your case, any FGC experiences? Why did I word it like that?
Yeah, you ever go down to the FGC and see Master Chief's nuts and bolts?
Black is nuts and bolts.
I only played a little bit of Street Fighter 4. I'm just straight up not a fighting game guy.
Why did I word that so weirdly?
Because you're a weird man, my friend. That's why.
Absolutely. But people, we've had a chance to at least cover some of these games. Notice we completely omitted Mass Effect 2 or 1 or anything like that. That is because coming up, my friends, we are going to have a full-length review for Mass Effect 2. Before that, if you're on the podcast feed, we may publish our original Mass Effect 1 review with some modifications, just because if you haven't checked that out, I think it's a really good opportunity to just whet your appetite. You can specifically hear us have the contrast with the first game's more linear approach, the fighting system, the action mechanics weren't as elaborate as the ones for Mass Effect 2 were, so you can check that out. And at the end of that episode, we will reveal what the next quest is going to be. Don't forget, we have 5 episodes available right now where we talk about the Nintendo 64, that first year, the launch lineup, the games within the first 12 months. We conclude that journey with a review of Star Fox 64. So all of that is available at youtube.com/rewind and the podcast feed. We have this series of episodes, then we'll take a bit of a break, a couple weeks, as we come up with the next season, which is going to be very different. It's not going to be console-specific driven, so we're changing things up a little bit. And before we reveal it on the next episode, guys, any teases or thoughts about what we may have coming up?
It may go back 2 decades.
Yeah, and it may
It's
be
such a
a
tease.
it may be a prime experience.
Jeeves, people, I'm trying. I'm trying to fix the nuts and bolts of this damn thing. I'm not getting it, man. Not getting it. It's gonna be really fun though. And hey, there's a lot of games that we did not. Yeah, that was people. Do not let that lack of enthusiasm mark how that third quest is gonna go.
Yeah,
But-
believe me, it's going to be very exciting just when he throws curveballs at us like that out of total nowhere, and we're completely off
We were
guard. It's like,
unprepared.
oh.
We're not sure how much we're supposed to say. We're
Yeah.
going to be talking about stuff from 2002. Let's just put it that way.
yeah, exactly.
Oh my goodness, that may be it. But then, yeah, if for
that
the
is it.
360, if there's anything that we didn't get a chance to discuss on the Discord, which if you're on the podcast feed, there's a link to join. There's a podcast specific thread called Podcast QR Episodes. You can just ask us, hey, you didn't bring up this game or something. Once again, it's so difficult to condense an entire generation's worth of games, which over 1,000 of them came out in just an hour and something. So that's why we picked just a couple of them. But we really do thank you for your time. If you haven't, we mentioned at the beginning, drop that 5-star review, whether it be on Apple Podcasts or specifically Spotify, which that's where I listen to podcasts now. That's like the biggest podcasting platform now. And there's also the YouTube channel. We have the watch along for that E3 press conference. We got some good feedback. So shout out to Backlog Kiaran and Ace Bunny and other people from the Discord that checked that out. We love hanging out with all of you. So up until next time, the nuts and bolts of this episode has concluded. But we'll be back with another episode of Quest Rewind.